Hello, greetings, and welcome everyone to another ASL week review. We are in the playoffs now. We're in the wild card round or the quarterfinals or round one, whatever you want to call it. I'm SirMoth. As always, I am joined by Brad.
Here I am.
And this is going to be a little bit different. We aren't going to have any like featured matches or anything like that because we only have four matches. We have in this league there is a consolation bracket, and two of those four matches didn't even get played. So we have two matches there, and out of the six people who made it to playoffs, two of them get a bye. That leaves us two actual playoffs matches to go over as well, and we're just going to go over every single one of them and show the replay as well. So I'm going to be switching between slides here like a madman, and it's probably not going to be pretty, but it's what we're going to do.
Yeah. I mean, only four matches, right? Give them the spotlight.
Yeah, exactly. So here you can see that our two consolation matches, we're going to do those first. We have Peaches facing off against Brett, and then next we are going to have Static against Shadow. So why don't you go ahead and take it away with Peaches versus Brett? I'll show the stats and then get the replay up.
Gotcha. And I'll quickly cover Melone takes a forfeit victory over Sorrel. She chose not to play her match. And then IO Kid and Dirty Logic failed to submit a battle replay by schedule and failed to announce that they were using an extension token by schedule. So their match results in a double forfeit loss. Why that matters, you ask me? Thank you for asking me, Moth. That's so nice of you.
Oh yeah, all the time.
Um, why that matters is because the winner of IL Kid and Dirty Logic was scheduled to play on Malone's side of the bracket. So Malone gets the forfeit win over Sorrel. There's no winner of the IL Kid Dirty Logic match, which means Malone gets another forfeit and it gets auto entried into the consolation bracket finals. So, fair or not, um, let that sink in for a moment. Malone showed up. He's in consolation finals, and whatever happens in these next two matches, the winner of these next two matches has to play each other for the right to face the forfeit champion.
Yep, it's definitely interesting. I mean, to be fair, Malone has had a lot of like really, really close games and been featured a lot. So maybe that's just fate telling him, you know
Sure.
what, you did good enough. You get this one.
You know what weren't close matches? Those two forfeit victories he just took.
Yeah.
So anyway, Brett versus Peach is, I mean, what a gift we have in the consolation bracket. This is a really nice match with two competitive coaches who had a good season. We've already talked about Brett tying his previous season high win total. And he's coming up against Peach, who is a season 9 finalist, who's a perennial playoff team. So this doesn't feel like a consolation match to me. Starts off, with some nice damage. Little bit of shenanigans with the Delmise missing a rock slide on Vikavolt, but I don't think it would have killed it. What it probably would have happened is caused enough damage for Toxicroak to kill it with a gunk shot late, early game, but ended up not happening early game and probably not mattering that awful much overall. Scyther is really good this gen. It just, with the boots option now, it just seems like it has more flexibility to play. Always was powerful, but now it seems like it has just a more dominant role. I don't know, maybe that's just me. I like the Stoutland Sand Spit combo was pretty hefty. I liked it. It was strong. Overall, a nice match. I don't know if your replay's finished, but a nice match with Peach taking the victory this week. What'd you think?
Yeah, the replay's still going a bit, but this was a really fun match because if you actually look at it, I'm sure they communicated about this beforehand. This is all D tier and E tier Pokemon.
Yeah.
So not a single Pokemon from A, B, or C. They're fighting it out with their low tiers, and that's just a really interesting thing to see because there is a lot of synergy in these low tier picks.
Hmm.
Like you have the Politoed and Swift Swim Beartic against
Yeah.
the Sandspit Sandconda and Sandrush Stoutland that you already mentioned. There was some really fun stuff that Toxicroak with Dry Skin against the Rain was
Hmm.
really good for Peaches, and I think that's a big place that a lot of the kills ended up coming from. Uh,
Yeah.
so this really was just a fun match where we got to see some stuff that maybe we wouldn't normally see. Well, definitely wouldn't. I mean, I'm sure a lot of their high tiers had much better matchups here.
Yeah. It was a nice match overall. I thought Baratic had a very real chance to win the match up until we saw the Thunder Wave come out on the Prankster Liepard that stopped the rain sweep. If he would have been able to swap out there, Liepard probably still kills the Politoed anyway, right? Because the Politoed was pretty low on health. So I don't know that it mattered at that point in the game. Maybe if he had a Lumberry, he could have won at that point. But ultimately, the Liepard coming in clutch. Liepard was a really nice pickup for Peach this year.
Yeah, it seems like these prankster Pokemon have been doing way better than I think any of us really expected. Liepard has been doing fantastically. The Illumise that was picked up has been doing amazingly. Klefki is the kill leader, so Prankster has just really been dominating this season. It's been interesting to see, and maybe a little
I'm
bit of
not
foreshadowing.
particular. I'm not particularly sure why. Um, Prankster's not inherently better than it was in past seasons, so I'm not particularly sure why we're seeing Prankster succeed. Other than the fact that maybe just it happened to be this season, more coaches are forcing it than in historical seasons.
Yeah,
But the ability didn't improve.
yeah, I'm really not sure. I mean, it's getting utilized really well. It might have some to do with the creativity of the coaches using them. I think a lot of times prankster Pokemon like that can just Thunder Wave. I mean, you can use a Liepard to Thunder Wave something like a Megaladios or something. I mean, that wasn't drafted, but
Sure.
you get the point. It's an E tier Pokemon that is absolutely crippling a high tier. And when you only have a couple high tiers, if that thing gets crippled
Yeah.
from an encore into a shell smash or whatever it is, that can be really good. But
Yeah, I mean that's something that's overlooked in Leopard, right? I mean it's an E tier price for a sweep stopper. That's not a bad price to pay for something that stops most Mons sweeping.
yeah, yeah, definitely a very fun Pokemon to see put in work. But on to match number two. Here we have Static versus Shadow. And this one, it's not the same low tier style that we saw, but it is honestly one of the most fun matches I've had the pleasure of watching in a while. It starts off pretty traditionally,
Hmm.
but there were some good switches throughout a lot of this game from Shadow, taking stuff like turn one, taking on the wild charge, and there seemed to have been a problem a little bit though with Shadow's team a lot in the early game. He was getting good switches, but still a lot of hits were chipping down important things. So even though it wasn't taking as much damage, that 30, 20, 40% was chipping down his walls. And honestly, I thought that Shadow was in a not great place uh, through the start of the match. He ended up really starting to take it back with Scarf Buzzwole, of all
Yeah.
things. I mean, not necessarily of all things. I think Scarf Buzzwole is actually one of its better sets, in my very incredibly limited Buzzwole knowledge. But But yeah, it was really interesting, and I'm not going to spoil the end because I want you guys to see it because this was an incredibly close match.
Yeah, I mean, it's without. I mean, all we really want to talk about is the ending, right? That's all we really want to talk about. So,
Yeah.
I think we're both mutually just stalling for the ending to come. And feel free to let me know when it gets to that point on your screen. But I mean, for the most part, it was just like you said, a little bit of back and forth. The early game wasn't the cleanest necessarily in terms of high level output. Um, maybe set up a little early with the Dragon Dance Hydreigon, or attempted to anyway, and then it got scared out quickly. That's the thing, with I think Shadow's done well this season, but I think is we're seeing him continue to work on it. And I remember several times throughout the recaps of season where it's just, you know, set utilization, man. You got to think about when you're building a set, like what's its purpose and when can it be used. And I mean, some things are mid game, some things are early game, and some things are late game. And if you get them out of their function, they're not going to perform the same way that you hope they would.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Especially Hydreigon. Hydreigon is really powerful, has a lot of different really good sets that can be used, and it does seem like Shadow has been struggling a little bit finding the right sets and the right times to use them. I
Hmm.
was really surprised by Mega Pidgeot this game. It did a lot more than I expected. I mean, despite the Hurricane miss earlier, but but yeah, we're reaching the end game. I'm on turn 27 here. My Logic has just gone down, so
You're
right
getting
now
there.
it's 2 versus 4, and this Buzzwole is really tearing things up. A couple really good sacks, and Shadow is looking, honestly, from my eyes, definitely looking to take it here.
Yeah, it seems a given up until the point in which it is no longer a given.
Yeah, so turn 32.
Yeah, we're just a couple of turns away from something that is maybe even I would use the word magical. Um, Certainly not something controlled by skill, more of a good fortune.
And the giant leech life, this
Mm.
Buzzwole, down to 5%. But here it is. Prankster Metronome into Focus Blast. Last turn of the game. Right
It's
before the loss. My brain, it just couldn't handle it.
like it's hard if you don't understand Mons and you haven't played Mons, for the last several years competitively. It's hard to even fathom how bad luck that is for Shadow.
Yeah,
It's also almost equally as hard to fathom why in the world Static would bring Prankster Metronome. Like, there's a comedy of errors here that just blows my. When I saw this in game, I was stunned. I'm talking stunned for minutes. I was just sitting there like, oh my god, did this really just happen? I never seen anything like this in my life.
yeah, I mean, I've seen a couple Metronome matches, and Metronome, I'd say a good 75% of the time, you aren't even getting something that would have done the 5% needed.
Hmm.
Like, you can ingrain, there are so many ways that Metronome just always goes wrong. And so
Yeah.
that's why no one ever brings it. It's a fun move, and that's probably why it was brought now, end of the season. If it's not coming now, then when is it coming? But the fact that it was not only utilized, but utilized in a game winning situation to get a
Hmm.
70% accuracy move and hit.
That's the thing that's being lost here, right? Not only did he bring pranks for Metronome, which, as you said, and this is the point, right? When do you see Metronome? In Metronome battles. That's when you see Metronome.
Yeah.
Metronome does not have competitive viability. just to be completely clear. Like, it's not questionable. This is blind luck.
Yeah.
So not only does he run Prankster Metronome, which should not work, he also ran a move that is notorious for not hitting and hit it. Like, it is. I hope he bought a lottery ticket that day because I feel like his luck was on point.
Yeah, this is one of those cases where I'm not even gonna call it hacks or anything like that. This was just beauty, and I'm really glad this match turned out this way out of any other way it could have gone.
I mean, wild. But what this looks like for a recap on how crazy this consolation bracket is. Melone advances to the finals off of a series of forfeits. So you got the Peach and Brett match that was low tier only, where Peach pulled it out. And then you've got Static advancing to face Peach based off of a metronome focus blast roll on turn 38. What I mean, you truth is stranger than fiction. What in the world is going on in that bracket?
Yeah, honestly, I kind of went into these playoffs thinking, okay, we're going to see a decent number of forfeits, and a lot of people aren't going to take this seriously, and these are just kind of throwaway games. But at this point, I'm kind of invested to see what happens. This is getting really interesting.
You know, the consolation bracket is not my favorite thing. It wasn't my idea. It isn't something necessarily that like me or Ian has pushed out. Like, this was something coaches asked for back in the early seasons. I would say seasons maybe 4, 5, something like that. Coaches literally said, "Hey, we didn't make playoffs and we're tired of sitting here for a month doing nothing. Can we do something?" So that's where the consolation bracket came from. And this is maybe a good example of why it should continue to stay because, man, what in the world?
Yeah, very, very fun, enjoyable to watch from a spectator's standpoint, and I'm sure enjoyable from a player's standpoint as well.
Gotta be. Shadow can't be mad. You can't be mad at that.
Oh
That's the
yeah,
craziest.
no.
That's the craziest thing. I mean, that's just you just gotta take that one and walk on.
Yeah, for sure. So, up next, we are coming into our two playoffs matches here.
Mm-hmm.
First is going to be you're going to be going over my match versus Dravos, and the winner of
Yeah.
our match will move on to face who is currently at the number one seed, TCP. And then
Yep.
next will be your match versus Lily, and whoever wins that one will go on to face Ian in the number two slot.
Yes. Yeah. You know, looking at your match in particular, right? Playoff match, high level. You gotta love it. One of the things I just love about the ASL team preview. What are we looking at? We're looking at a Deancy and a Colossal. I love seeing stuff like that. Deancy may be a little bit more common. Colossal, definitely not at all. But I think that's something that the ASL and our specific tiering structure and the way our coaches have gotten used to battling, I think it's just something unique you get to see that isn't necessarily present in most other leagues. I don't know. Can't help but comment on myself. Comment on that particular element myself. What I thought was interesting, of all the leads you could have picked, why'd you go back to the same lead that you led with in the first match?
Because Stealth Rocks was going to be very important. I don't think Dravos brought any removal last time, and it was really important. I knew that Weavile was coming, and it was huge to get that thing chipped down.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Toxic wrecks a lot of what Dravos wants to lead with, particularly the Zygarde. Looks like an unfavorable matchup. If I could Toxic that Zygarde, I felt like I had the game in the bag.
I thought that was fun. I had hoped in maybe somewhere you said, "Well, I led with it last time. There's no way he's going to think I'm going to lead with it this time," and then you led with it again. I really liked that. And at the very first turn, I faced a similar problem when I battled Travos in that I really wanted to toxic this Zygarde. And so turn one, as a spectator, I don't know what your team is. I don't know what his team is coming into this match. But I actually at turn one was thinking, man, if he could toxic here instead of going stealth rocks, that would be clutch for him. Then when you do toxic and he doesn't throw the 1,000 arrows down, you
Yes.
had to be out of your mind
Oh,
excited.
that was the perfect. And then it switched me directly into one of my Zygarde counters. I couldn't have asked for a better turn one.
That was about as good as it could have went. And I don't blame Dravos here because he's running a Zygarde, which conventionally, if you're going to hit Cobalion, I don't know that there's anything better to hit it. And he's obviously predicting you to make the logical play and switching out. So he Dragon Tails, gains him a little bit of momentum. You don't get to swap in you want. I get where he's headed with this thing, but man, does that got to be kind of demoralizing at turn one. That went as bad as it could have went for you, I
Yeah.
guess, at that point. But you do get the Cobalion right back in very quickly. I believe you go for the rocks. You do. You go for the rocks very quickly. And I mean, you're kind of set up by turn four, going into turn five. I'm imagining you're feeling pretty good because you are set up pretty well. And then you reveal the Bandit Earthquake, right? And
Mhm.
Alamamola takes, I don't remember what it was, roughly 200% from Bandit Earthquake. And then Dravos does one of those things that you hate to see people do. He swaps the Alamo back out and ends up forfeiting his Zygarde by turn 10. At that particular turn, I didn't know what your sets fully were. I didn't know what his sets fully were, but I knew that you had rocks up. It was turn 10. He'd lost his Zygarde, and you hadn't lost much. And that did not play out well for him at that particular moment.
Yeah, Zygarde was definitely one of the bigger threats, and really, I'm honestly surprised at the way this match went. And the reason I'm surprised is if you look at our last match, I brought the exact same six Pokemon.
Mhm.
The exact same.
Yeah.
Four of the sets that I brought, exactly the same. Actually, scratch that. I changed one item on one of the four.
Yeah.
Cobalion and Diancie were the only two sets I really changed. And
Sure.
so I was expecting some really different stuff. And I mean, Dravos did switch out three of the Pokemon on the team, but Landorus Therian won me the game last time. And it was Bandit Adamant, same exact set. I'm really surprised that it didn't look like there was any prep for it, honestly.
Sure.
I
Well,
mean, it was an awful matchup, to be
yeah.
fair, against my Landorus Therian. There is not much that could have been done.
Yeah. I mean, it was, but then again, Lando T, the reason that I personally have a genuine disdain for Lando T in terms of usage is it's slow. It's unreasonably
Mm-hmm.
slow for the price that you have to pay for it. So it's extremely easy to threaten out, but Lando really wasn't threatened very much in this particular game. And you can say this, you can say that, maybe he could have brought maybe the Sigalith to at least naturally, cause some guessing shenanigans or who knows. But it didn't seem like, at least in the early game, Weavile ever came in versus Lando T.
No, the Weavile. I mean, it was a Life Orb set. It didn't really have the opportunity. In order to get Weavile in, Dravos had to sacrifice one of the bulky Pokemon every time to do
Yeah.
it.
And here's the thing, man. Like, hats off for you. Nice win, right? You get the 5-0, you get to move on. Something to think about for coaches, not Dravos necessarily, because he and I talked for a long time after the match, and I think he's working on some things that is going to make him very scary to have to face in future seasons. But you got a guy like Weavile, right? You got a mon like Weavile. You got a mon like Hydreigon, right? The way that those mons are going to be impactful can change based on the way you use them, not just the way that you prep with them, right? And so we're talking about getting Mons in on positions to be successful. By the time Weavile actually hit the field and had the opportunity to kill something, it was facing like a +4 defense Diancie.
Mm-hmm.
What's it gonna do?
10%.
Um, and I mean that's the thing, and not to kick someone while they're down. Dravel's had a great season. He should be very proud of himself. He come into the ASL not ever having played here, and there is a bit of a particular style of play in the ASL that can be challenging for new coaches. And he made it to the playoffs, and he made it to playoffs above coaches that perennially make playoffs, like IL Kid and like Peach, Static even. So hats off to you for a very good season, my friend. But I think you and I both would agree, speaking to Dravos directly, that the Weavile play probably wasn't exceptionally good in this match. Now, that being said, something I talked to Dravos about off, topic or kind of in the background, and I won't share all of it, but what I will share is, I want to get your thoughts on this, Muff, but I don't think Weavile and Gengar should ever be on the same team, ever. They do completely different things. Or excuse me, the things that they want to do are too similar to work together, right? Weavile wants to hit a lot of psychic types, but he doesn't want to take a lot of shots. Gengar wants to hit psychic types, but doesn't want to take a lot of shots. Yes, they can do other things. They can ice shard, they can energy ball, they can sludge wave, whatever. But their primary functions are too similar, in my opinion, to pay the price tag of each of them.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what I was thinking during prep. Is I felt like I was prepping for Weavile, Gengar, and Toxtricity, all with the same Pokemon. Like every time I prepped something that was specially defensive or just mixed defenses, like my Diancie could have handled all three of those perfectly fine. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's, yeah, when I was looking at the team during like the very beginning of the season, we were doing our draft recap. I thought that this combination was going to be oppressive. I thought Weavile, Gengar, they're very good offensive types, and they're going to cover a lot of different things offensively. But it's kind of hard to actually have it work out that way when they're just doing mostly the same thing.
Now, if even one of them had momentum, then maybe it's different, right?
Yeah.
But you've got two Mons that are hard to get in and have to be dry swapped out. They're gonna force switches 90% of the time. I mean, almost nothing is going to stay in if you intentionally brought in a Weavile or Gengar. You're going to bring in Weavile or Gengar in situations where they're causing switches. They just don't belong on the same team together. They just don't. And I think that this particular match was an example of how they don't function together super well. Um, Hats off to you. You had a good match, bud, and I'm excited to see you get to progress and play TCP. TCP had a nice season. He's had a good early season, but the second half of his season wasn't amazing. It certainly wasn't bad. Obviously, he's a great coach, but it wasn't necessarily the way that I think he would have hoped for it to end. So maybe a window of opportunity here for you in the semis. We'll find out, right?
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it, and I'm certainly gonna make it. I'm gonna try to make it happen. But
Yeah. I mean, who knows? Once you get to this point, right? Once you get to high level matches, semi type matches against good coaches, your odds of winning are 50% at best.
yeah,
That's just my personal stamp on it. If you prep perfectly and you play perfectly and you're playing someone that is worthy of being in the semifinals, I just believe your odds of winning at best are 50%. That's just the way I look at it.
yeah. I mean, I've been doing a little bit of prepping, and without spoiling any of my prep, of course, I've been looking at it, and I think there are ways that I can win for sure. I
Sure.
think there are ways that he can win for sure. And I think there are also ways that either of us could win that the other just won't expect. Like, I can't prep for everything that a really good player is going to do. Someone
Yeah.
like TCP, and I like to think that maybe someone like me, when you're prepping against these high level players, you can prep against their team, but really once it gets into the battle, that's what's going to determine it, because a lot of times things that you would have never expected, never even tried to prep against, are what's ultimately going to seal the deal. So we'll
Yeah.
have to see how that all goes down once it actually gets there.
I mean, that is part of it, right? And I remember leading into my match with Lele, a little bit of a transition statement. Hello, professionalism 101. You had asked me, how you feeling? That's one of the things you DM'd me earlier. You asked me, how you feeling about your matchup with Lele? And I believe my response was, I feel good enough. Like, when I'm coming into a playoff match, particularly with a high level coach, and Lele is without question a high level coach, I just want my team to be good enough to get me there. Like, just get me into the battle. And once the battle starts, I'll figure it out. I'm confident in my ability to battle. So I just want to get a team good enough in prep to be competitive. I'll do the rest of the work if I have to. And it sounds like maybe where you're at with TCP. Certainly trying to find edges where you can, but ultimately, you just got to get a team good enough to be able to click accept challenge, and then the show really starts.
Yeah. So actually moving into your match here, I'm not playing the video quite yet. I just want to take a second and pause and look at the team preview. I'm not usually much of a team preview guy. I think a lot of the matches, what happens inside is much more important. But I have to be honest. I did stop a little bit in team preview before watching this replay, and this battle, just going into it, it looks like your power level on is pretty much just higher across the board. This looks like a very difficult match for Lille with the teams that have been brought. And then as soon as you bring in that Silvally Ghost, I look at it and I look at the team and it's like, what switches into it? Dodrio?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
this game, I feel like Lily was making some good plays. It looks like there were some good counters. There were some good predictions on the Seismitoad. And the Alolan Executor with Teleport was actually putting in a lot more work than I was expecting.
Yeah.
But really, it felt like a lot of what Lily was doing was just trying to find an edge and not quite doing it. Like even those Seismitoad predictions with the Inteleon that happened early in the game, they're going to happen later in the game. They still don't pick up the KO, and Inteleon goes down for it.
Yeah, it was a nice match, and I expected a good match. Lil A is a coach that's really, really impressed me. Not to compare coaches, because I think there's some danger in that, but maybe the most impressive coach coming into the season for me. I expected you to play well because I know you outside of the ASL. I didn't know Lil A, and I didn't know what was going to happen, and he really, um, quite frankly, exceeded my expectations by a large margin. I said at the end of the last recap video, and I meant it seriously. I did not want to play him round one. I really didn't want to play him round one because I did feel like I had a decent opportunity to win that match. I did not want to see him go home in the first round. I really wanted to see him advance further. But men in prep, I got to looking, and I have used Silvally defensively throughout the season. On most weeks, and I had some little investments here and there, but I haven't full on went offensive with Silvally all season long in the anticipation that I knew I was going to bring it to a match where the way that my team sets up, right? I've got Coco and I've got Charizard Y. You have to build your team to take a certain amount of damage. If you're going to play my roster, you're going to have to build your team to be able to absorb a certain amount of damage because you can't get 0 damage from a Charizard Y and a Coco. It's just not going to happen. And I thought to myself in prep leading up to this match that he was not going to have the budget to take the damage that Silvally was going to force down his throat. And I think that's what happened in this match.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it was really I mean, there were things that broke the important pieces for the Silvally early. The Silvally was breaking important pieces for your other offensive threats early. And you had Just like you were saying that in order to fight against your team, you need to prep a certain amount of bulk to take hits. It looked like your team this week, it wasn't immensely bulky, but it soaked just enough hits that it could get in those offensive Pokemon. And even though you were like down 4 and 6 somewhat early in the game, I felt like you had a pretty tight grasp on this game for most of it. And I thought that, like, unless there was something like a really unexpected Mew set or something like that, I felt like you had it pretty well. Which,
Yeah, if you were just looking at the player count, I got down pretty big in this match. But that's in part, I mean, 100% my fault. I just didn't have an urgency to go out there and get those kills early on. Like to me, I saw a very clear path to victory. Even like to the Dodrio, he brought Bandit Dodrio in our first match. I 100% knew that he was bringing Bandit Dodrio to this match. So I EV'd my Latios to take. I de-sped his Dodrio on purpose so he would get a hit off on my Latios. I would live any hit and I would be able to kill him. Like I had that trap set in prep before we ever showed up to play. You know what I mean? I just, in my mind, I had a very clear path throughout his team to get to what eventually I thought would be a Coco sweep. Turned out it was Savali. But hey, you take what you get.
yeah, and I will say the Mega Charizard, I was impressed to see Subtoxic. I think that Mega Charizard might normally have a little bit of trouble with Mega Altaria. Uh, and so the Subtoxic catching that off guard, I think, was really big in the end. And none of this is to say that Lily wasn't playing the match well by any means, because, like I said earlier, there were some good reads. There was
Mhm.
some amount of good prep here. It just felt like a little bit of being overwhelmed, and that I mean, I think that's kind of something that you can expect to see in some of these playoff matches is if you have a coach like yourself, even if it's two coaches against each other who are really, really good. This is a case where two coaches went against each other. They're really, really good. It can be really easy if you have just a slight edge in these types of matchups to
Mhm.
build up that advantage and really snowball it to where it doesn't look close, even though it could have been pretty close. It just doesn't quite look that way.
Yeah. And this was, a particular matchup where I was extremely lucky. From a standpoint of just like wanting to win, I was extremely lucky to play Lil A early on in the playoffs, even though I didn't want to. In our first match, if you remember, I won our first match, but I did not win our first match. He won our first match. I just happened to crit him. Um,
Yes.
and typically in rematches, the losing team has more to gain, right? Because you've learned, well, this didn't necessarily work. I could have done this way. So I walked into this match with a distinct advantage in terms of knowledge learned from our first match. I think my team matched up against his pretty well because, like, he has some amazing mons that don't work versus me. He has Corviknight. Corviknight does not work versus Coco Char Y. He's got a Breloom. Breloom's gonna die versus a Char Y and a Coco. There was, I think, a distinct roster matchup in my favor that kind of limited his options, and I was able to prep really specifically toward the things I thought he could bring. But that being said, let me just say again, I said it in the draft video, I've said it throughout the season. This Mew Mega Altaria pairing has got me wanting to draft Mega Altaria next season. Like the way that he used Mega Altaria really impressed me and got me excited. I haven't drafted Mega Altaria since the Pixelate nerf. And I've always loved Mega Altaria, and I haven't seen it used successfully. And this guy's got me thinking, man, maybe I need to go back and revisit that mod. Inspirational play throughout the season for Lille, one of my favorite coaches of this season. And I just hate to see him go home week one. I really do, because I think he's got a lot more to offer than a quarterfinals exit.
Yeah, and I can agree with you on the Mega Altaria point. I'm kind of the opposite. I probably would have never considered touching a Mega Altaria. It's not a Pokemon that I mean, I gave Lily's team a pretty poor rating just because I didn't see Mega Altaria as a threat. I think I was certainly proved wrong
Yeah.
that its typing, its ability to set up. Lily has done a fantastic job on knowing when to mega evolve it and all kinds of different stuff. It's been really fun, and it's been just really enjoyable watching Lily play in general. Because, like you were saying earlier, I was kind of surprised as well. I don't usually, if I see a player who I haven't seen at all, like I had seen most of the other players from watching past replays of this league or a few of them in other leagues, or at least had people talk about them quite a bit in this league. But Lily, really no expectations going in, and that lack of expectation led my expectations to be blown away. So, very good season from him.
Definitely one to watch for next season. Very excited to man. I think looking at him, his roster construction, the way he played, going into season 12, I give him a real shot to be back here in the big dance, competing with the best because I think he's one of them.
Yeah, yeah. Lily is one of the players that I really look forward to playing again. Our match was very fun. It was one of those matches. Sometimes I go into a match and I'm a little bit cocky. I'm like, oh, I have the match up here. I've got prep. I've got stuff to absolutely blow this player away. And then a Venomoth sweep. And I mean, you could argue that there was a little hacks there. I wouldn't argue it. I think that Lily played our match very well, and it's play like that that makes me really want to play someone again.
Yeah, and again, I know I've said it, and I'm probably beating a drum here, but just the pairing of Mew Altaria is so smart and shows such a savvy move. And the reason that you've definitely underestimated Altaria is because think about this, right? Okay, think about this. How many Mons are setup sweepers, good at their base offensive level, and also can serve as a legitimate wall?
Not
That's a
many.
very short list. It's a very short list. Mega Venusaur can be very good offensively, can be a great wall, but it's not a setup sweeper necessarily, right? You
Mm-hmm.
know, Charizard X, crazy heartbreaker deal with great setup sweeper, not a great legit wall. Very few Mons can offer the combination of problems that Mega Altaria can bring to you on a week to week basis. And you pair that up with a Mon that has limitless potential. How do you prep? How do you deal with that every week? You can do anything. Altaria can beat an A plus Mon in any of its three different specialties. How do you walk into a week comfortably knowing you've got those two checked? Short answer is you can't. You don't.
Yeah. Yeah, a very good draft. I'm really looking forward to seeing what these players, not just Lily, but all of these players, how they're
Hmm.
going to be drafting for the next season. I mean, I know that we're in playoffs. This is supposed to be the most intense part of the season, and in a way it is, but at the same time, my brain is already going, man, look at all the things that have happened.
Yeah,
I really look forward to seeing all the things that will happen with completely new rosters and all of these coaches
yeah.
relearning how to use their teams in really enjoyable to watch manners.
And I think it's appropriate too because you don't want to spend the whole episode talking about the four teams or however many teams that are going to get talked about all next week, right? Um, because me versus Ian, you versus TCP, Static versus Peach, they get their whole little episode next week.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that being said, I do play Ian. And I don't think we've talked about that slant in particular. I play Ian this upcoming week. That's going to be a great matchup. I'm very excited about that. For those of you that maybe are unfamiliar, every season, Ian and I rig the schedule. Slash, I ask Ian to, and he does. I don't know how to do anything with docs because I'm a complete moron. But we always play about mid-season. We do a little seasonal holiday where we have our bowl and we do our little tournaments and stuff like that. We've never played in the playoffs. Never once have we matched up in the playoffs in the history of the ASL. We've been here, 4 years now. We've never matched up in the playoffs. In part because Ian tends to miss it here and there. So I blame it mostly on him. But this is our first chance to show off what we can do against each other in the big dance. And I cannot wait for this battle. I've already talked to Ian in DMs, and pre-warning, it's going to be sweaty. It's going to be rough. I'm looking forward to it. I've got a real shot at taking my exit, but I've also got a very real shot at beating him and moving on. It's going to be a great match between myself and a very good friend of mine. I cannot wait the opportunity to beat him. But you know what? I'm kind of wishing him good luck, man. I want to see him get on there. I want to see him win his first ASL title. He deserves it. There's no one in the league that deserves it more, that's competed longer and played better and doesn't have that title yet. So I'm kind of pulling for him. That being said, I'm going to crush you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that match because I know that your last match was incredibly close, and
Yep.
there were a few things here or there that ended up leading to your defeat, but it was not by a large margin whatsoever. And I think there is a lot of. I think you guys have both drafted teams that are very flexible, and I think if you wanted, you could bring almost entirely different sets. We could be seeing an
Yeah.
entirely different match depending on how prep goes. It's not like some of these other rematches where you rematch and, oh dang, I already brought my sets that work, I guess I bring them again. This is going to be an interesting one.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny the way my season worked out. I beat Ian by all accounts, but I had some bad hacks that cost me that match. That's just reality. Lil A beat my tail by all accounts, but some bad hacks happened and I ended up beating Lil A. So like this thing's turning around on me real quick and in a hurry. We'll see what happens, but he should have the edge in terms of the rematch because like I said, I feel like I beat him, but just hacks got in the way. So he's going to have the edge in terms of that rematch. Our teams are very good, but his team is better. Certainly, at least on paper, maybe not for our different styles, but his team is better on paper, and he's got the edge in terms of the rematch. So it's uphill. It's uphill.
Yeah, for sure. So, is there anything else in particular that you want to highlight here before we go into the end portion?
Not in particular. Just would say that we're hard at work on season 12. We hit some bumps this weekend that slowed us down from getting out information that I'd hoped to be able to discuss on this weekly recap, but we are hard at work on it. The thing I would say to ASL participants and just viewers alike is we are going to have a season 11 off season. If you are in the ASL server or if you are listening to this and you're not in the ASL server and you want a chance to play in the ASL, signups are open to everyone. If you want in, come on server, sign up for the off season whenever it gets posted, and you're in. Guaranteed. There will be room for you. So I guess minor announcement. We haven't said it on any type of media, but season 11 off season information should get released very soon. If you want it sooner, at TCP as many times as you want. Eventually, he'll give you the information you're asking for.
Yeah, just start wearing him down early and hopefully it should get you there.
100%. This is all TCP's off season, quite literally. Ian and I both just said, "Hey, hands off. If you want to have an off season, then make it happen." So it's his plan, his idea. He's making the tiers. He's making the rules. This is all TCP, so it's going to be a good one. We should have a lot of fun. Give coaches a little bit of a break before walking into that next season.
Yeah, that's knowledge that I didn't know, and that's going to be really interesting. Maybe we can actually have something that's pretty high quality without you and Ian having your hand in it.
There's a real chance of it, but who knows? I shouldn't have said that, so that way when everyone starts complaining, they can just blame me and I'll just take it. So maybe I spoiled that. Backtrack on that at this point. It's my idea if you hate it. If you do love it, TCP did it and make sure he gets all the credit for it.
Well, sounds good. I think we're going to have some really interesting information, and for sure, we're going to have some really interesting matches next week. But as far as this week goes, that is all that we have. So that is me signing out. And Brad, you want to give a little goodbye?
Nah, we'll see you next week.
See you next week.